You know, there are some things that enrage me when people talk about the late Roman Empire. No other era in Roman history is so grossly oversimplified or misrepresented than the late Roman Empire. For instance, when historians say that the fall of the Western Roman Empire was inevitable, or that the Eastern Roman Empire survived because it was stronger than the West. Or another favorite of mine, when they completely forget that Rome was again capital of the Western Roman Empire after 450 AD. Or when they forget that the Eastern Romans were true Romans but instead call them Byzantines. Or of course my absolute favorite, when they present Emperor Julian as the last pagan emperor of the Roman Empire, a true classic of oversimplification. Yes, Emperor Julian was the last openly pagan emperor, but paganism was far from dead after Julian, and time again there were many tries to revive the old religion of the Roman Empire. And one such fascinating occurrence took place as late as the 480s in the Eastern Roman Empire, where a certain Illus gained the support of many pagans in order to overthrow the Emperor Zeno. So then, was this really a pagan uprising, a last effort to restore paganism? The slow death of paganism is probably one of the most wrongly portrayed aspects of the late Roman Empire. It is as if after Emperor Julian, that is how it is always presented in basically every historical documentary or other media, that the pagans just simply gave up and that it was over. They realized that Christianity was winning, and so they slowly and peacefully joined Christianity in ever greater numbers. We hardcore Rome nerds, however, of course know that nothing could be further from the truth. The victory of Christianity was heavily contested for a very long time after Constantine started favoring it in the 320s AD, and there were many attempts to restore the old pagan cults. Even in 400 AD, it is estimated that around 2/3 of the population in the Western Roman Empire was still pagan. The Christian emperors started issuing ever stricter and more oppressive laws, effectively transforming the formerly religiously surprisingly tolerant Roman Empire into an extremely oppressive theocracy. Heavy penalties were introduced for pagan worship, the old temples were closed, often looted, sometimes even damaged and despoiled, and pagans were not allowed to hold any state offices anymore and were possibly even prevented from joining the army, a point that I will analyze in a separate video. So the pagans were certainly not happy with these developments, especially since the Greco-Roman worship had been an integral part of the Roman Empire since the founding of Rome in 753 BC. For more than 1,000 years it had been the most normal thing, and therefore, understandably, the pagans were not amused that suddenly a minority of extremist religious zealots started dictating them what they were and weren't allowed to do. Hence, the Emperor Julian was the first very prominent figure of a counter-movement that would flare up time and time again. But his attempt to restore paganism was short-lived because he died too young. However, only 30 years after Julian's death, the Western Roman Emperor Eugenius and his Frankish Magister Militum Arbogast reversed the intolerant edicts of the fanatic Christian emperors, especially from the Eastern Roman Empire, and allowed religious freedom for pagans. The temples in Rome were opened for one of the last times ever. But Eugenius and Arbogast lost the Battle of the Frigidus River in 394 against the fanatical Christian zealot Theodosius, Emperor of the East. Paganism was outlawed again. Flavius Stilicho was religiously very tolerant and might have had secret pagan sympathies, and so as long as he lived, paganism was again allowed to happen in the West. But after he was killed on orders of the incompetent Western Emperor Honorius, religious intolerance came back with a vengeance. But even then the fight of the pagans was far from over, because in 423 the Emperor Ioannis was proclaimed Emperor of the West, and he again restored pagan worship to some extent. But he was killed in 425 by the Eastern Roman Empire, as it so often happened with religiously tolerant Western emperors. But even then, paganism was far from dead. In the east, the city of Aphrodisias in Asia Minor was a pagan bastion, where many pagan temples were kept in excellent working order and many pagans found refuge. In Alexandria, there was also a large pagan community. Then there were still philosophic schools at Athens where many Neoplatonists taught and many pagan philosophers still lived. The Academy of Plato in Athens was still a center of learning in those days. The Neoplatonist Proclus taught there, and among the students were the later Western Roman Emperor Anthemius and his friend, later urban prefect of Rome, Messius Phoebus Severus, and of course the Magister Militum of Dalmatia Marcellinus, who was openly a pagan until his death in 468. Since Marcellinus was pagan, Dalmatia also remained a stronghold of paganism at least until his death, but possibly even later under his nephew Julius Nepos. Damascius even wrote in the 6th century that Anthemius was a secret pagan and planned to reopen the old temples in Rome and restore pagan worship. If that is true or not, we don't know, but this shows that paganism was far from dead even in the late 5th century. And another one who was attending the teachings of Proclus in Athens and possibly made the acquaintance of Anthemius, Marcellinus and Severus was one called Pamprepius. He was born in 440 and was a philosopher, a poet and a devout pagan, famous for his supposed ability to foresee the future. In 476, the year in which Romulus Augustus was deposed at Ravenna, Pamprepius went to Constantinople and made the acquaintance of one called Illus, who served as a general under the Eastern Roman Emperor Zeno. And this was the beginning of a fascinating friendship, which would culminate in a rebellion against the Eastern Emperor himself. And please consider supporting this channel via Patreon or YouTube membership, because I really need your help in order to be able to continue this work on late Roman history. Without your support, I don't know how much longer I can continue this channel, because as you can imagine, the YouTube algorithm does not exactly push a niche topic such as late Roman history. Alternatively, you can help this channel by buying my merch directly here on YouTube. I have created a merch store with some cool or funny or weird late Roman merch, which you can buy directly here via YouTube in the video description. Thank you very much. So back to Illus and Pamprepius. Pamprepius was quite unpopular in Constantinople because he was openly pagan in the possibly most Christian city of the world, which in my opinion showed that this guy had a massive ego and did not fear Christian repercussions. He was even banished at one point from the city by the Emperor Zeno himself, but then returned again with the help of Illus some months later and was even made senator and patricius by Illus. In 479 then, Marcianus, a son of the former Western Roman Emperor Anthemius, attempted a rebellion against Zeno. I talked about that very unknown rebellion in this video here. Pamprepius encouraged Illus to fight against Marcianus and even foretold Illus's victory with his supposed powers of foresight. And indeed, Illus stopped Marcianus, and thus Zeno's rule was saved. From that moment onwards, the bond between Illus and Pamprepius grew even stronger, and Illus consulted Pamprepius very often to foretell him the future. We can already see here that Illus must have been quite open to pagan practices. Even if he was not openly pagan, he at least must have been a strong pagan sympathizer, realizing that helping the pagans might gain him the absolute loyal support of these still surprisingly large pagan communities. In 481 or 482 apparently, Illus and Pamprepius started devising a plan to overthrow the Emperor Zeno. To that end, Pamprepius was tasked to travel to Alexandria and gain the support of the large pagan community there, but apparently he was not successful. At the same or a similar time, Illus was in Constantinople again and survived 2 assassination attempts by Zeno's wife Ariadne and her mother Verina. The capital truly had become dangerous for him, as he was not liked by Zeno's wife and mother-in-law. It is even said that Zeno had Verina banished to the fortress of Papurius in Isauria as a punishment. Because life in Constantinople had become dangerous for him, he moved to Nicaea on the pretense to cure the wound which he had suffered in one of the assassination attempts. In 484 then, he was elevated to Magister Militum per Orientem, Supreme General of the Eastern Forces. and if you are a Rome nerd like me, and chances are pretty high that you are if you are watching this video, then you might be interested in the incredible rings and other Roman accessories which the SPQR Shop is building. They make legionary rings, they make rings with different themes, they even make coin replicas, statues, pendants, attributes and terracottas. And the most incredible thing is that they handcraft every single piece. That's right, this is really high quality handcrafted material. There's really no better present for yourself or someone you know who might be a Rome fan. I put the link to their shop in the video description and into the pinned comment, and with this link you can get a 10% rebate on every purchase if you type in the rebate code Maiorianus. So go and check out their assortment, it's really quite incredible. So back to Illus. Of course you can imagine what happened after his elevation to Magister Militum. Illus basically immediately rebelled against the emperor. These power plays are quite fascinating because we are often told how stable the Eastern Roman Empire was, but as we can see, this is far from true. There were rebellions all the time. Basically, there were 3 usurpations under Zeno, one from Basiliscus, where Basiliscus even managed to become emperor for a whole year. Then the revolt of Marcianus, son of Anthemius, and then Illus. This is far from the myth of the stable Eastern Roman Empire. But while such things were deadly in the West, with barbarian invasions all over the place, the East, with its geographically much more secure and much richer provinces, could survive such chaotic rebellions. In any case, Illus promptly declared Marcianus emperor. Yes, the same Marcianus, son of Anthemius, whom he had helped to defeat in 479. But then Illus changed his mind and instead chose someone called Leontius as new counter-emperor to Zeno, while Marcianus was sent to Italy in order to ask Odoacer for help against Zeno. The whole plot is so insane that it could be some crazy fan fiction, but this is apparently really what happened. Of course, Marcianus was only semi-motivated to help the Illus who had destroyed his plans back in 479, and so instead he went to Rome, where he met his brothers and probably led a quite happy life, never to return onto the political scene ever again. Despite the lack of support from the West, Illus managed to achieve an important victory over an army that Zeno had sent. A battle was fought near Antioch, from which Illus emerged victorious. Fascinatingly, it appears that Illus had freed Verina, yes, the very Verina who had attempted to murder him, and forced her to crown Leontius emperor and to convince the imperial officers at Antioch and in Egypt to join Illus's rebellion. After she did that, he sent her back to the fortress of Papurius. It appears that he had not forgiven her for the assassination attempt. The pagan community of Aphrodisias, the pagan stronghold, gladly joined Illus in his revolt as they heard stories how Illus had a pagan friend and soothsayer called Pamprepius, and that Illus was favorable to the pagan cause. So in 484, everything looked as if paganism would make a big comeback thanks to Illus and Pamprepius. However, we must be careful here, since we cannot prove that Illus really was a pagan. It could also be that he simply wanted to depose Zeno and that he saw the pagan cause as a tool that he could exploit in order to achieve his ambitions. But he certainly was a religious moderate in a time of great intolerance and suppression of paganism, and this is indeed quite remarkable. In 485, however, Zeno sent a new army against Illus, and this time Illus and Leontius lost, and they fortified themselves with the remnants of their army in the fort of Papurius while being besieged by Zenos' army. Pamprepius and Illus's brother Trocundes were also among the besieged. According to some historians, Theoderic himself, yes, the Ostrogothic king, was part of Zenos' army. Trocundes attempted to escape and return with a relief force, but was captured and killed by the besiegers. Illus and Leontius remained unaware of his fate, but their spirit remained high because of Pamprepius' assurances of Trocundes' imminent return and ultimate triumph. Such was the belief of Illus in Pamprepius' ability to foresee the future. Their unwavering determination endured for more than 3 years in the fortress. However, in the 4th year, the truth about Trocundus' demise came to light. This revelation kindled a blazing fury within Illus, who felt betrayed by Pamprepius' apparent deceit. Consumed by anger, Illus executed Pamprepius. And this shows that in those times, friendship with people such as Illus did not count for much. Pamprepius might have been innocent and really might have believed that a relief force would come, but we will never know for sure. Subsequently, the fortress fell into enemy hands, orchestrated by the treacherous brother-in-law of Trocundus, dispatched from Constantinople by Zeno. Illus and Leontius met a grim fate as they were both beheaded and their severed heads delivered to Zeno. And so ended this rebellion of Illus in 488 AD, which is sometimes quoted as the last real attempt of paganism of having any chance of being restored. I personally doubt that had Illus been successful, paganism would have made a big comeback. Judging Illus's fickle character, I doubt that he would have lived for much longer, and pretty surely an aggressive anti-pagan emperor would sit on the throne of Constantinople soon enough and continue with anti-pagan policies. By around 500 AD, the number of pagans was just not high enough anymore, especially in the east, to pose a real threat. But nevertheless, Illus's rebellion is fascinating because we still see how the pagans were very much alive in that time. So next time you hear that Julian was the last attempt at a pagan revival, you can smile and think of Eugenius, of Ioannes, of Anthemius, of Marcellinus, and of Pamprepius and Illus. And please like and subscribe so that you won't miss any future videos on the fascinating era of the late Roman Empire. And please consider supporting my work on Patreon or via a YouTube membership, because the long-term sustainability of this channel really depends on your support. And I would especially like to thank our new Restitutor Orbis member, Sindri Gretars. Thank you so much, Sindri, for supporting this channel in such a generous way. I really appreciate it a lot. And we also have a new Kaiser supporter, Brandon. Thank you so much, Brandon, for supporting this channel in such a generous way. Without amazing people like Sindri and Brandon, this channel would not be possible, because, believe it or not, this channel is not generating a lot of revenue. Because as you can imagine, late Roman history is a niche topic that does not get an insane amount of views. So your support is really appreciated absolutely much. Thank you so much, friends of late Roman history. And if you want to learn more about Marcianus, the son of Anthemius' failed rebellion, you can watch this video here in the upper right corner. But if you want to learn more about Anthemius' possible planned pagan revival at Rome, you can watch the other video in the lower right corner. I say thanks again to all friends of Roman history, gratias tibiago and bene valete.